You know boss fights? Usually they are the climax of an episode or movie, and all the budget goes towards that 10 minutes of visual dopamine injection. But in Frieren, we got none of that. Demon King? Bro was so irrelevant he got killed off screen. However, even though Frieren is a chill anime about a nonchalant elf's emotional journey after the main adventure, there's some good ass action. The fights with Lugna, that pink haired demon lolly who I forgot the name of, and Aura. The entire mage exam arc are all fucking amazing, from the animation and music to the use of magic and choreography, which reflects each mage's personality. And while all the aforementioned are what elevates Frieren from a reflective, melancholic show to a holy fucking shit, it's like my eyes are having an orgasm, there's a much earlier and shorter example which I think encapsulates Frieren's amazing storytelling, as well as the punch in the gut action we see later. But before we dive into the fight, let's quickly talk about what makes Frieren's storytelling so effective and captivating. In episode 3 of Frieren, oh by the way, this video contains spoilers for episode 3 of Frieren, we start strong with the rich emotional aspect that is at the core of the show. A seemingly chill subplot where Frieren and Fern go shopping should be boring if it was any other show. But there's a reason Frieren is number 1 on my anime list, and it's not recency bias. Through this little story, Fern spies on Frieren because she thinks Frieren will buy some useless shit. And at this point, neither us or Fern has any idea of Frieren's motives. Long story short, since this video isn't about this part of the episode, Frieren wants to surprise Fern since it was her birthday, and was preparing to surprise her. Then we get a wholesome scene where Frieren gives Fern her present and treats her to dinner, using the money she secretly saved up, which shows how she has made an effort to connect with her, like she said she would back in episode 1. Also before this part, Fern reads Frieren's mind and guesses she wanted to eat Merkur pudding, which triggers Frieren to flash back to a time when Himmel did the same thing. Back then, Frieren also said she didn't know anything about her fellow party members, which is a well-written parallel and amazing use of a flashback that enriches Frieren as a character as we see her make this connection and realize the value of what she finally came to do. Alright, with that out of the way, the second part of this episode is the first instance of a fight we see in the show, and it is spectacular from a visual and writing standpoint. There's an unwritten rule when writing a novel that each chapter should be like its own little story, with an introduction, climax, and resolution. The second half of episode 3 does this perfectly by incrementally building up to its climax brick by brick and providing a nuanced conclusion to close up everything. We start off with Frieren training Fern. The plan is simple. Frieren casts offensive magic, Fern defends with defensive magic. Frieren shoots a big beam of magic and Fern makes a shield to block it. But then Frieren aims for the gaps in Fern's defensive magic, skillfully slipping through and almost killing her. This technique is later brought up in the exam arc, but I don't want to spoil it, so I'll save that for another video. Or you can just watch like the millions of other videos on Frieren's exam arc. Next, and this is important later, Frieren spams attacks and bombards Fern, which leaves her exhausted by the end of the training session. An interesting thing about this offensive and defensive magic is that we don't actually know what it is. All we see is just a big beam of white light, and then some generic ass force field. And this is done entirely on purpose. The author, Kanehito Yamada, does this deliberately to be stereotypical and label these spells as defensive and offensive magic. But this cliche is uprooted later, which we'll get to. And immediately after this training, we get a glimpse of the mechanics of magic in Frieren. We saw that Fern was tired from casting defensive magic, and we can guess that it's due to its mana consumption. Or maybe she was just tired from just spamming defensive magic. But the show provides a solution for this, as Fern epiphanizes she should cast it in select locations at the moment of impact, which she was not doing earlier. This training scene prepares Fern for what's to come later in the show, and shows progression in her abilities as a mage, since casting defensive magic in that select location right before the impact is a very highly technical skill, which I don't think any of the other mages that we later see do. Another important building block is when Frieren chastises Fern for not reading up on magic history, after Fern makes a remark about how powerful defensive spells were. Yet another piece of subtle setup for the fight to come. And while this scene may seem like filler that was played off as a joke, it's adding a key ingredient to the dish, so let it cook! Finally, we get introduced to the actual villain of this episode. Frieren travels to a village where Qual, a demon who was so overpowered that the hero's party couldn't defeat him and had to seal him away for 80 years, with the aim of finally killing him. Frieren explains that Qual invented Zoltrak, a powerful spell which pierces through any defense and kills you. A spell so strong that it backfired on him. Yeah, I don't know what that remark meant exactly since it's not explained in the anime, but I'm pretty sure it's some One Piece R foreshadowing which will come back like 300 chapters later. Anyway, we cut to the next day and Qual is finally released from his seal. 80 years have passed, and he learns the Demon King is dead. Filled with anger, he vows to avenge his master and casts Zoltrak, his ultimate skill, the one-shot one-kill spell, the most overpowered magic ever invented, and Fern just blocks it with basic defensive magic. Bruh. Now you might be thinking, what the fuck? Didn't Frieren just hype up Zoltrak for the last couple minutes saying how nothing could stop it? What happened? Frieren explains that after Qual was sealed, humans spent years analyzing Zoltrak and creating new defensive spells for it. In 80 years, Zoltrak, which was once the equivalent of a mate in one, became ordinary offensive magic you teach to toddlers. When I saw Qual use Zoltrak in Frieren's flashback, I didn't make the connection that it was basic offensive magic. Surely I'm not the only one, and I'm guessing it's because of the dramatic way it was shot, which made it seem like something greater than the magic we've seen before. Qual was like, bruh, this is like being a Minecraft PvP god in 1.8, then quitting for a couple years, only to come back to your sword doing about as much damage as a fucking sneeze, and everyone's using shields. But in his prime, this guy was a fucking menace to society. Literally. Imagine being so good that the party of heroes had to stunlock you for 80 years to finally beat you. He was truly a generational talent when it came to magic, and far ahead of his time. And what makes Qual even more intimidating is the fact that after he was sealed away for 80 years, he realizes that his magic isn't overpowered anymore, and instantly adapts. Bro saw Fern use that defensive spell once, and instantly understood how it works on a technical level, and reveals that it works by attuning itself to offensive magic and dispersing its power, which is something Frieren never mentioned. He also identifies the spell's weakness, being its mana inefficiency. Doing all that in under a minute truly epitomizes the meaning of genius. Then he switches up his attack strategy to spam all the buttons on the controller, but luckily Frieren had prepared Fern for this, thanks to their training earlier, and quickly ended the fight by pulling an Uno reverse on Qual. Another detail to note from this scene is how Qual's Zoltrak is black while Frieren's is white. This could symbolize that he is evil cause, you know, black represents evil and stuff. I'm not racist guys, trust. While Frieren is obviously the good guy here, thus her magic is white. The difference in color might also be because humanity's version of Zoltrak has been heavily modified, and in a later episode, it is explained that this version that Frieren uses has a damage multiplier on demons. It's a demon killing spell, so that could also be why the color's different. Circling back to the start of this section, in just 10 minutes, the show tells a full sub-story using subtle building blocks, then creates rising tension with the introduction of Qual being this Thanos-like demon. We then get some exposition which juxtaposes the anticlimactic fight and revelation. But actually, it still went hard as fuck, thanks to the stunning animation and soundtrack. Seriously, Zoltrak by Evan Cole is so good. And finally, we wrap this all up with a funny flashback, but also an introspective moment as Frieren and Fern are leaving. This bit shows how Frieren thinks highly of Himmel, and how the hope he gave to the world still passionately lingers, even 27 years after his death, and she smiles when Fern mentions showing just how big Himmel's influence was on her. By the way, I made a video diving deeper into how Himmel guides the show through scenes like this, so if you're interested, then I'll leave a link up in the top right and I'd appreciate it if you check it out. Qual's story may only have been 10 minutes, and the actual fight was only a tenth of that, but even in that time frame, we grasp how threatening he could have been if left alive. But his quick death symbolizes the core theme of time in Frieren, and how valuable it is as it led to rapid development of magic and other stuff. All this depth in 10 minutes is why Frieren is my #1 anime, and why you should watch it if you haven't already. I hope this video was aight, and if you have anything to add to my massive waffle, feel free to leave a comment and I will read all of them. Please consider subscribing, and until next time, whenever that will be, thanks for watching and be grateful for humanity's rapidly developing technology. Seriously, I can't live without indoor plumbing. Peace.